He called himself Playoff P. By the end of the bubble, it was way off P. And now, honestly, this version of Paul George, he is a part-time NBA player, full-time podcaster. I'm going to be honest. At this stage, he's Podcast P. He is Podcast P. And the Sixers are in freefall. They're in absolute freefall. And it's not looking good for them. They've just lost Jared McCain, who I will talk about in a video a little bit later. And they've likely lost Joel Embiid for quite a while because the man broke his face. I know people want to call Joel Embiid soft, but the man literally broke his face. Like, there's nothing you can do when you break your face. Especially where he broke his face. Like, he literally broke a part of his face that is directly, like, covering his brain. He cracked his skull. Like, he's just cursed at this stage. But Podcast P himself is out here stinking it up. He's out there stinking it up. Through his last 6 games, he is averaging... Sorry, through his last 10, he's played 6, and he is averaging 15 points per game on 43-36 splits. Ironically, much better than the first 7 games he played. On the road, he is shooting 40-28. For the season, he's averaging 15.9 points per game on 41-31 splits. These are like early 2000 Iverson shooting numbers. 4.9 assists, 3 turnovers a game nearly. Okay, 1.7 steals. Cool. And he's averaging a bit more assists than his career average. But like, this is a team, in fairness, they won a couple of games that he played in. And he had 2 good games in a row. But the Sixers are going nowhere. Like, they've lost likely lost Embiid. They're going to lose Jared McCain. And this team is going to be heavily reliant on Podcast P. And Podcast P is out here doing Podcast P things. Talking about how his relationship with Chris Paul has changed. Like, at this stage, what's the point of even being an NBA player? Like, just be a podcaster. Like, I understand if you're an NBA player and you want to get into media and you want to run a podcast. I kind of get the off-season podcasts. But, like, we're hearing about him talk about his bad relationships with literal people that are still in the league. Like, again, it's one thing if Chris Paul's retired. It's not if... Like, I don't care about Podcast P. But the reality situation is, even if it was barely just talking about Chris Paul, it's like, he's clickbaited. He's clickbaited it. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this guy is just... He just doesn't really care anymore, does he? I miss Patience PG. He was fearless and a baller and wasn't concerned about feelings. He was just a killer on the court against prime LeBron. PG, soft. He's not a real person. He's AI. I mean, maybe at this stage. But, like, I understand coming towards the end of the year and wanting to get into media. But, like, be selective with the topics you choose to talk about. There's no point talking about current players in season. If it's in the off season and he wants to say that, cool. Not in season. Not when you have to play this guy more times this season. There's a bunch of stuff, and I'm just like... And the worst part is he sucks. He's playing garbage. He is averaging 16 points on probably up there with the worst efficiency for anyone averaging 16 points per game. And now 2 of his 3 best players on his team are gone. And I think Paul George is going to step up. I think he's probably going to average close to 20 on the season. But you're now looking at the guy who basically replaced you for the Clippers in Norman Powell. You're looking at him talking about how, we're addition by subtraction, we're better without him. And then he's outplaying you. He's being outplayed by Norman Powell right now. The addition by subtraction, a guy who was your teammate who despised you. And I don't even think it's surprising at this stage. I really don't. Like, Podcast P is just Podcast P at this stage. Like, that is the only thing I can call him is Podcast P. Because Paul George has gone out of his way to make nicknames for himself using the letter P. He has his podcast called Podcast P. He is Podcast P, the full-time podcast host, part-time basketball player. And like, the guy is going to be 35 years old by the end of the season. 35. And they have him for like 2 more years, I think, guaranteed. This was one of the worst. It's going to go down as one of the worst contracts because we're seeing it more and more in the NBA. Players signing big contracts and immediately like regressing. We're seeing it with like Jamal Murray. I would be shocked if in the next CBA there is not a clause on max contracts or just a clause on contracts in general where you can, after 2 years of any contract, it's a team option. Because I actually don't think the players are going to have the leverage to negotiate that after the Simmons situation. And look, I know he's playing really well now and people forget things quick, but like the Kyrie disappearing act in the middle of the 2021 season where he just vanished, like, while being paid a max. I get it. Always kind of forgiven and forgot. You forgive and forget. He's doing great in Dallas right now, so there's no point bringing that up. But like the Simmons contract, the Jamal Murray contract, because of the second apron, a bad long-term contract can literally destroy a franchise's short-term future. One bad long-term contract means a team literally closes their window like that. So I would say the likes of this PG contract, the Embiid contract he signed in the summer, the Simmons contract, the Jamal contract, and probably more that I can't even think of. I think that these type of contracts are going to be so detrimental that the owners are like, well, if you're going to put in this second apron so that we can't overspend and we're screwed if we just sign one bad one of these, we cannot be stuck to it for 4 years. The Bradley Beal contract. Because being stuck with a bad contract for 4 years basically means you're in no man's land. If you can't trade the person, you can't tank. I think there's going to be an increase in dudes getting paid $40 million to sit at home. So I would say there's going to be a team option probably after 2 years in every single contract in the NBA. I think that's going to be something that happens in the CBA. And again, it stops people signing a $200 million contract and chilling, which happens way too much. But anyway, that is the video. Podcast P's already made his money. He's probably worth $100 million at least. He's going to be Podcast P for quite a while. But just, if you want to be Podcast P, do it in the off season or at least during the season. Don't have more podcasts released than games played. Anyway, I'll see you guys.